to demand. We've seen the creation of a Democratic Senate. We have the first Black senator from the state of Georgia. We also have deals that you should know about so that you can help perpetuate and gain and increase the momentum of financial support for individuals who are putting together deals, real deal makers. So, here at A Seat at the Table, being able to meet dynamic individuals who are true stakeholders in the progress of our people, the progress of our community, and giving you insight so that you too can share. You know, Brandon Comer is not only the CEO of Comer Capital Group, he is also an advisor to municipalities across the country, but he's a visionary that has a vision for our community to go and blaze trails, to actually be a candle in the dark in this financial industry that deserves to embrace and empower individuals like you. What's going on, Brandon?
Nothing much, Munson. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you say it like it's easy for you to do it, but I am so proud of your vision. I'm so proud. I remember when people used to talk about private McClendon counts and the tons of brothers that were on Wall Street at the moment, black mayors that got there. Um, we recognize the importance and the intentional requirements that needed to be put in place, i.e., Maynard Jackson, in order for us to begin to have some participation in every deal. And I say that in every deal. I was talking to a young brother who I truly love and respect. He does Black with No Chaser. And he kind of outlined his three most important. Obviously, he's a millennial, so it's kind of like talking to your nephew, and you sit there, have grown nephew at the
Right,
same
right.
time. So it ain't like, yeah, well, do this. You kind of like, well, let's just share a little bit. This play you hadn't played. Let me give you a couple of decades so you can kind of see. And so he kind of walks me through his three priorities. Obviously, social justice is high on the list. Obviously, he has a couple of other things of healthcare, education, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, in a capitalistic society, we must begin our evolution in economics. We can't give our evolution because the creation of poverty is based on a wealth gap. The creation of poverty is based on the fact that they don't do business well. The creation of poverty is, and I shared with them, I said, well, it has to be a priority number one. Because when they said we were getting ready to have this COVID, their priority number one was to flood and give everybody checks they had never seen. Reparations would have been out this during COVID, no COVID, and all the checks that they sent out would have taken care of reparations already. We really wouldn't be having these conversations about reparations, but they didn't mind doing it for themselves. Anyhow, I did New York. How important is our community's insight to Maynard Jackson's requirement to be across the board and enforced by every single municipality, Black mayor, state legislator, at every level, given that every road, every airport, every water treatment plant, every single deal is financed and paid for, and much of it without any participation.
Well, I mean, that is, it's a phenomenal thought. When I reflect on Maynard Jackson and the stance that he took and the playbook that he set out that is not being followed, I think about not only the missed opportunity, but if we turn the tide and do exactly what you're saying, just how impactful that can be. I mean, if you think about not only the municipal government, you think about the federal government, if you think about corporations, the amount of transactions that are done on a daily basis. If you think about the amount of contracts that are let on a daily basis, I mean, the amount of volume that's going through the capital markets engaged by these institutions is astronomical. And for far too long, we have not had, as this show is adequately titled, a seat at the table. And there have been some giants in my industry, who've definitely broken down barriers, and a lot of that due to, Black elected officials who have given them an opportunity and who have helped them grow and scale their firms. And so, the first thing I challenge, are our elected officials who are in control to follow the playbook, right? I mean, they don't have to ask anyone; they just have to simply act. So we start with the low hanging fruit. I mean, I think it's a grave disservice when you look at an African American run municipality with a predominantly African American population, and their contracting is 10-20% African American. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I would say, one, we attack the low hanging fruit, and we think about it holistically. When we think about contract participation, we often go to industries like construction, but there are certain things that come top of mind. We don't think about financial services. We don't think about professional services and attorneys and all of these other things that these entities engage in on a daily basis. It needs to be across the board. So that's the first piece. From the federal government standpoint, it's the same thing, right? We've seen recent rollback of certain components of federal policy that will make what we're talking about a little bit harder. Hopefully that will change, in the near future. And as we look at what percentage of contracts should require minority participation, Black participation, right? Such that we're not foregoing opportunities for Black Americans because the minority pie is being eaten up by other counterparts. I mean, let's specifically spell that out. What should that level of participation be, for African Americans? And then let's build capacity for firms to take these opportunities down. One thing that we've been hindered by is the ability to scale, and that's often an excuse that governmental entities utilize when it comes to doling out large contracts or having us lead these endeavors, right? So we don't just want a 6 or 10% minority participation in these things. We want to lead these transactions. We have the capacity, and with increased opportunity, we'd have the scalability to do it on a much larger playing field. Now, as I look at across the sector right now, a lot of those giants, particularly in my industry, are older. And so one thing we have to really be cognizant of is succession, because the businesses that we have in our community that have some of this storied past, we can't let that die out. So we really have to be fostering this next wave of entrepreneurs who will take that mantle and continue to build upon the legacies of some of these giants, and undergird them so that we don't lose a generation of progress.
You just did a deal. Let's take a look at this most current deal so we can kind of talk about that and let individuals know exactly what you are talking about.
No, absolutely. So one of our initiatives has been to help undergird the Black banks in this country. One of the things you mentioned is so much of this is being fueled by this racial wealth gap. And in order for us to address and tackle the racial wealth gap, we can't have a serious conversation about that without talking about how we undergird and ensure that the remaining Black banks in this country are not only sustainable, but are in a position to thrive and expand. And as this pandemic showed, a lot of our Black businesses were extremely vulnerable. And then when programs like PPP rolled out, they didn't have access. A lot of them didn't have relationships with black banks, and the relationships they thought they had with some of the larger banks turned out weren't as fruitful as they thought, right? They were locked out. And then they all of a sudden they wanted the black banks to come and save them, when they hadn't really banked black. But then we recognized there was a capacity issue there. There was a technology infrastructure issue there. And so, and in this post George Floyd era, we saw corporations trying to figure out how to be a part of the problem while making decisions in silos. And so they were wanting to put deposits and other things into the banks, which aren't necessarily bad, but they aren't the optimal way to be impactful. So we saw a need to step up and develop the National Black Bank Foundation, as well as the Black Bank Fund, to say, if we're going to optimally impact these banks, this is what that looks like. And then we know that they need investment. So we're going to raise a $250 million fund to ensure that they have tier one capital to be able to take down these additional opportunities that we're going to provide them through the foundation. And so the video is relative to that proof of concept, which is a transaction we did, a $35 million transaction we're doing for the Atlanta Hawks, who have been a great corporate partner and wanted to be impactful, and decided that with the upcoming refinancing they have for their practice facility, that they wanted to do it with a syndicate of black banks that, we ultimately helped pull together, and making this or marking this the first transaction by a Major League Sports franchise, to be financed by Black institutions. And so, as the owner of the Hawks, Tony Ressler, said, during the press conference on this deal, it just made good business sense. It's a good deal at great market rates with great people.
Black banks are essential to closing the racial wealth gap in this country. But black banks struggle because the communities they serve are struggling. A parade of talent has left the black community, has gone on to build wealth in almost every other community less their own. But now it's time to give back. Today we announce a historic transaction. For the first time, a majority of black banks in America have been given an opportunity to pool their resources and partner with the NBA franchise, the Atlanta Hawks, to make history.
Out to Dre, long bomb from midcourt, good!
For the first time, a major sporting franchise venue will be financed by black banks in America, but it won't be the last. At the Black Bank Fund, we remove barriers for any corporation to do business with black banks, no matter the size of the deal.
Black banks seldomly have an opportunity to meaningfully participate in large transactions of extremely high credit quality due to lending limits caused by capital constraints. The National Black Bank Foundation is changing that forever. Our mission is to leverage relationships with large corporate partners like the Atlanta Hawks to generate additional loan capacity for black banks to lend to mothers, fathers, and small business owners. No longer will size and capacity stop corporations of goodwill from banking black.
Now it's a choice. Every corporation in America can now bank black if they so choose. We have an opportunity to create equity for those that need it most. Join us at blackbankfund.com.
So for individuals or corporations, if they go to Black Bank Fund right now, can they participate, or is it just for major corporations?
No, if you go to Black Bank Fund, hopefully what you will see is a pathway to engage with black financial institutions in a variety of different ways, right? I mean, this isn't a singular approach. We need individuals to open accounts with black banks, small businesses to recognize that you can have your lending services met with black banks. And then for large scale corporations, there are a multitude of ways in which you could participate, right? You investing, through the fund to help provide tier one capital to these banks, and doing large scale transactions. And the reason the Atlanta Hawks type deal is important is black banks are mission driven entities, right? I mean, they lend in their communities, and therefore their portfolios can be viewed a little bit more risky. So when you hit a financial crisis, you know, some banks get a cold, black banks sometimes get pneumonia. And so by diversifying the credit quality of their portfolio with transactions like this that provide long-term stable fee income, it actually enhances their ability to do more of what we need them to do more of, which is that mission-based lending in our communities. And this also shows, again, back to my earlier, point, which is that these institutions have the capacity, they have the wherewithal to take down sophisticated large transactions. And this is a proof of concept of that as well. So corporations, the excuses that have been put forth previously of a lack of capacity, a lack of ease, of doing business with Black financial institutions. We want to dispel all of that and build good corporate partnerships. But then also, to your point, make sure that the financial services that these institutions can offer are readily available to everyone across the country.
It's been obviously I applaud your effort. I applaud any innovative transactional language. We really need to see our business with each other more as an exchange. I think conceptually, both yourself and Rolling Out and the community has to create a lexicon and literally highlight. And you'll get this. I mean, I know we're not going to get there automatically, but I'm really concerned that we don't indict each other in a loving and way when we even talk about it. Like it should be a minimum. If you are a person, a Black person, you live in a community, you have a $10,000 savings account in any other bank, just take 10% and put it in. So for me, it's more on if you were talking to me and I couldn't say, yes, at First Independence, I have an account.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Atlanta. Yes, at CTB, gonna have an account.
Right.
I think the quagmire for our community is not putting the scoreboard up. So it's kind of like playing for the Hawks and you can't see the scoreboard. And part of what I say, and I'm sharing, obviously we're just talking, and I'm really proud of brothers that are in finance, because I think that the need for brothers to be in finance so that they can't say that we're not in that business, that we can't do a $35 million transaction today and one tomorrow. I think the quagmire that our community finds itself at is nobody's really saying, really, we're saying that if you're a Black billionaire, that you should have $50 million in at least one Black bank. I think the math works against us when we don't work together.
Right.
I think the math works against us when we don't say to a Black church how you're robbing your community if you don't at least have some of your wherewithal at a Black bank. I think the other thing is Black banks have to be more communicative at the same time in their marketing approach to our community, in their ability to demonstrate a capacity that is kind of invisible. Because if you don't know a Black banker, you don't know what their deals are. You don't know what their success is. You don't know how to go get your car there. And it's very, very obvious that for many major corporations, they already have their checking system, their direct deposit is not going to a Black bank. So I think the kind of conversation is, how do we take, even at the Black Bank Fund, create a marketing program that literally says, you know what, in February, we are literally looking for $100 million to go into a Black bank that's been around 100 years. The other thing is, we know PPP is coming. Mm-hmm. If you are a corporation and you got $40,000 plus, which means you had all your paperwork ready, instead of going to the same bank, this time, contact today a Black bank and allow them to make the fee. CTB is going to be 100 years old. So why wouldn't we as a community say that we're going to take our PPP as Black business people and run that fee through CTB so that for their 100 years, they can do $100 million. And they don't need to have all the small. We need guys that we know already are going to get another 50, another 100,000 because you have 10 employees.
Right.
We all got the checks last time. Let's get the check this time, but let's run it through a bank that's there. So I think that tent pole has to begin to exist, kind of like a pre.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And that's the type of conversation and the level of creativity that we're hoping to help infuse in the market. It's like anything else. We work with a lot of distressed municipalities. We work with HBCUs. And when institutions are just in the fight, right, of survival and maintaining, sometimes, it's a little more difficult to really ride certain opportunities, and to roll certain strategic initiatives out. And that's why we created both the foundation as well as the fund, so that the foundation can, through the resources that it will have, provide that level of support, thought, strategy, marketing initiatives, et cetera, and help foster these types of, transactions and conversation. We between conversations we've had with, other, franchises and corporations, we hear some of those same thoughts. We don't know where to start. We don't know how to bank Black. We already engaged in this deep relationship with, ABC financial institution. And that's fine. Nobody's saying leave that institution and completely transfer everything over. But there's certainly a way in which you can move some accounts. There's certainly a way in which on those transactions you do routinely, Black banks can participate, and not only participate, lead or co-lead. So it just takes a level of intentionality. And then on our part, to make sure that once we have those entities of goodwill who want to do that, we make it as seamless and as easy for them as possible. We've got to remove the excuses, because, frankly, I'm optimistic that this newfound goodwill will remain for some extended period of time. But assuming we only have 22 minutes under the sun remaining, we need to optimize this, while we can, and add to our sustainability and growing capacity. And that's what we're focused on. We're trying to put, to your point, as many points on the board as fast as we can, demonstrate the ability, the skill set, and the capacity, and then the rest will be an ongoing effect from there.
My concern is obviously not being able to see the scoreboard. Yeah. I think the invisible, and I think it's intentional, because finances, hey, if you don't know, I made a 3% fee off that billion, you just never know. I think the other thing that I'll share with you is just the unacceptable number of zero, or a negative number for us. Like, we do not want your zeros or negative numbers, because I do want to share with our community that you can get a negative number. They have often given us a negative number. But those are the unacceptable. Zero participation is unacceptable. And I think that has to kind of be across the board as a community financial conversation. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing is we've got to really begin to call those individuals who say they represent Black people, but they don't represent any dollars. Like, we've got to eliminate the individual that says, I work for the NFL, but I'm not doing business with the Black Bank Fund. So we really have to be very transactional and very intentional about the first 100 corporations that can actually do it, that we give our dollars to. So, i.e. Nike. What can we say to Nike to allow them to participate in a way so that we as receipt shareholders, because for me, Maynard was saying you're taxpayers in Atlanta. So you're a receipt shareholder already. That's it. If you're walking around in Air Force Ones and they're financing their buildings, and they're financing innovation, and they're financing designs, and they've got payroll, and they're sponsoring events, as shareholders, receipt shareholders, we should have some obligation, particularly goodwill and reciprocity, economic reciprocity with these corporations. So the receipt shareholder concept is something that I want us to be able to educate our community, because they've taken a entire generation and erased their expectation to receive something that they paid for. Now that I don't know how they did it. That was a
that, wow. You just said a lot right there. You know, especially when we talk about a time where, you know, expectations are so high in certain respect, the expectation of getting what's actually due to us from what we put forth in these companies is at an all-time low. You know, my children are millennials, and they or sub-millennials, and their expectations are relatively high, right? From the wrong people, from me. But you know, when I think about that, I think about the fact that the first two stock I owned were Nike and Coca-Cola. You know, my dad really tried to instill financial education in me at a very, very young age. And he looked at the fact that I liked Nikes and I drank a lot of Coca-Cola. And so he used those things as an opportunity to say, you are a consumer of these products. You need to be an owner. And then how we take that conversation even further to say, you know, here is our spend. And we hear certain initiatives around that as far as trying to quantify exactly how much we pour into these various products. And then you'll see some campaigns occasionally on trying to, you know, ensure a certain amount of that spend comes back to our community. But it's not a very comprehensive or holistic approach. And it's often, you know, you hear about it 1 minute and then it's gone. It's not a sustainable effort. But I think when you have this level of discourse on an ongoing basis, and you can quantify it, right? We know how much we spend. The math is there, and we can put that out. And it's probably exponentially greater than what we quantify. So, but what is the ask? You know, what is the most optimal ask, and how do we make it across a variety of platforms that impact us? These companies market to us. I mean, this is your space. You know, what's their spend? I mean, they're marketing to Black people. What is their marketing spend with Black firms? I mean, we know half the time is why they get it wrong. Nobody's at the table who, you know, can help, you know, advise in that space. And yet we still buy the products despite missteps, right? So I don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole, but I think you're right. Our level of expectation, it needs to increase. And that's centered around a greater awareness. And that's why I appreciate platforms like this, where that information is put out, because frankly, I don't believe that conversation is being had, particularly amongst a large component of the masses that are going to be requisite to be a part of the conversation in order to really drive ongoing change. We have to have the numbers, and we need more people participating in the conversation.
Well, I just want to make sure that we think about some KPIs. I'm actually going to give you at least 20 days, you know, so 1st of February, you and I, because I want to begin to develop a place. We've got a site we're going to launch that kind of will highlight just specific news, financial information just for our community. I want us to have a scoreboard that everyone can understand what's going on and what's at stake, like particularly as it relates to publicly traded. I don't want to, and municipalities. So we can begin to really understand, and at least with the transparency that we can see.
Right.
and then begin to at least do a 7-part economic goal on the basis of our consumption and participation. So if we're X% of Instagram, we have this expectation of you.
Yep.
If we're this much at TikTok, then we want to know this much. I think the same has to be said even on NBA draft day, even on NFL draft day. What's your give? We know what you got. What's your give?
Right.
And I think that we're not saying that you might should give. We're saying you got to give, because you got it because you know that you are, and we want you not to risk it, but you're going to park it somewhere.
That's it.
You're going to invest it somewhere.
That's it.
And this is your big day. And it is only an example of how you want others to have if you're going to at least announce where you're going to park something. And I think that those are the things that we can do. And we want people to be transparent. I don't think that, if somebody's going to let us know how much their contract is, then clearly they shouldn't have a problem saying, and I have a black bank. I think with individuals like yourself, it allows black banks to be able to do what most banks can. If it's wealth management, then where's their wealth management division so that people don't run someplace else and say, well, you don't have. And I think that's the advent of where a young generation like you can create partnerships still within the bank and within the facility, create facilities by which they can do the wealth management transactions without that. And that's part of what I've said to Brother Kenneth Kelly. And, and I speak to Miss Day working to kind of how do we get on the scoreboard? I don't know the people at One United. Is it One United?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know them very well at all yet. And I say yet because I don't believe that's an unattainable goal. But I clearly want us to figure out how to put some scores on the scoreboard, begin to have dialogue that is very transparent, so there's a level of expectation. I think that we reduce the expectation. Maynard Jackson was the first cover of Rolling Out magazine. So it wasn't like if Maynard was standing here today, he wouldn't say, hey, Munson, because he knew me. I think who knows your name is very important. I think we're in the wrong cheers business. Our community is cheering for people who don't know you. Your like is wasted because he doesn't know you. And he really doesn't like you, but you like him, So at the end of the day, they got it all reversed, and It's a Jedi mind game going on, and you act like you really are somebody, but you're really not anybody. And it's this fake currency. So at any rate, I think that we've got to figure that out, Brandon, how to create that opportunity and create more transparency within these corporations and municipalities.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, it's across a variety of areas. Obviously, we talked about contracting, things like that. I mean, it's on diversity at the board levels when we're talking about publicly traded companies. I mean, I like what the NASDAQ, rolled out. I mean, it's taking that and taking it a step further, right? To, ensure that there's a certain level of participation of minorities.
Well, I have a couple of problems even with Maynard. I know he's probably doing it just to get it by, but I don't believe that white women qualify for minority participation. Not when you're in the majority. I don't believe that you are a minority. At that individual, you're a majority. I don't want to think that race doesn't give preference. Not gender, it's race. So I don't want to have that conversation in us going down. Obviously, we needed what he did. I think it was part of what made the deal, but it's a lie. It's not true. They are in the majority. And clearly they are not for the movement, and all the voting displays where they are as it relates to progress for our community. So I think those are the things that we have to be cautious of, because we can't advocate the same contracting to benefit people who truly are already benefiting, and they already have a privilege way beyond those of us who haven't got the dollar. So we're already a negative, so we can't start giving to you yet until we get positive, So I think that's another option we just need to be concerned about, because that's kind of how it goes. Okay, we'll just open the door up to minorities, and then they start playing the gender minority. We want to be race based this year, even if it's just our 13%. You know what? We don't have to be 35%. Just make sure we 13% everything. So I mean, I'll take that.
Right. That's a big number. That's still a big number.
I'm just saying, just make us a part of it. And I laugh about it, and obviously just think that there's some truth there as we talk about what real minorities are, and stop defining them when they're convenient. And all of a sudden we got these new faces that couldn't run the business, but they the face of the business.
Yeah, now I'm with you there. And that's why one of the things I mentioned earlier, as we're looking at how we dole that out, I mean, especially at the municipal level, I mean, it should reflect the population. I mean, you got 60 something percent African-American population, your contracting should reflect that. Your personnel, your executive leadership, all of that should reflect that. So I think there's a real opportunity there. And given that they are public institutions, the ability to be transparent about that, is extremely easy if it's so desired. So I definitely think you're right as far as where we could get those performance indicators from, as far as publicly traded companies and and municipalities. And the other thing is, during this time, a lot of our municipalities are obviously facing some real challenges. A lot of them have been hardest hit, and so we need to ensure that we are undergirding these institutions and ensuring that the level of capital and support that are coming out are flowing to them as well. There's obviously a real strain right now between large urban municipalities where most African Americans reside, and what were prior federal initiatives. So I think that's something else that we need to be talking about, because so many small businesses, I mean, a lot of these municipalities have had programs that have helped facilitate and undergird these businesses for so long, and with their lack of revenue and resources, with these business closures, it's really going to take a Herculean effort for us to get back some of what we lost. But a lot of businesses have survived. And to your point, how do we make them scale? And that's really one of my main focuses, is building some very large, multi-generational Black businesses that we can scale. And then you'll start to see other Black businesses grow, because it'll be a part of the supplier chain, et cetera. So as we start building some really large organizations, we'll start to see that impact, or that I don't want to say trickle down effect, but we'll start to see that ecosystem, really, optimize, and start to see even more growth, of Black owned businesses. And as a Black entrepreneur, that's something that I'm extremely, passionate about. And having Black financial institutions that could provide the capital that's necessary, that is an essential part of that equation, is essential. And that's why I'm extremely passionate about this Black Bank initiative, is because there is no growth without capital. Our communities have been deprived of it for so long, whether it's from direct federal policy, on down. And so we can't talk about rebuilding our communities in a system that's built on the multiplier effect of what banking does, without having banks dedicated to helping with that mission. And you also can't do it just with the members of that community. It's going to take some outside capital. We've had so much outflow for so long, with less than one turnover of a dollar in our community. It's going to require additional capital from outside to help build those, the communities as well. So that's why another reason our initiative has, focused on corporations, and those beyond just saying Black people bank Black. Is going to take a much larger ethos in order for us to really, to get the level of impact that we want to have.
Yeah. Well, You got 20 days. We want to keep the score. We want to make sure in another 10 days you're at our RideCon, just to kind of have a similar conversation with those, and just to kind of even begin to get those who are open to those transactions, and at least set up an expectation. I want to increase the financial expectation that we have as it relates to our spend and our consumption in this country. So I want to thank you for coming on Seat at the Table. Congratulations on the hot deal. I know it's just the beginning. Let us know how we can support what you do. I don't know if they gave you one of those little plaques that at the end of the transaction.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have a tombstone for this one.
Tombstone for that.
Absolutely.
I think people need to see that. I think young brothers need to see that, and I think we need to talk about the top 100 corporations that could do it without fail. And I think that if we don't identify them for our community, they'll continue once again to be blind to having an expectation that this is what this corporation should do. Let us stop celebrating. If we want Elon Musk, if he wants to take us to the moon, we want us to make sure that Tesla is doing business with us. We want Mark Zuckerberg, if he's going to let us and be our friend and like us and let us like each other and WhatsApp each other, then we want the participation, and we appreciate all that he's going to do in making this a more equitable. And then we want to know that he's doing business with people we know. We don't want to deal with people that we don't have access to. So, and we do want to deal with real professionals who are in this business of diversity. And we do want a analysis done by a firm that is Black, so that we get an honest perspective and can trust what's going on, and who can actually understand that they have to implement some participation.
Absolutely.
All right, 10 days, and I'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Munson, brother, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the platform, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
You got it. Thanks so much, man.
All right.